focusing on the idea of 50-50 is one of the worst things I think that can go through somebody's mind in making decisions about children. Children are not loaves of bread where you divide them into slices and pieces. And then the legal standard is what's in the best interest of the children. And nowhere in that best interest analysis does it look to what the parents' rights are, really. So but there's a huge movement to try and focus on 50-50. And in fact, that's not the trend in the courts that I practice in. The courts stick pretty firmly to the idea of what's in the children's best interest.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by the lovely Liz Felt Wakeman, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name. Liz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you very much. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and take a look at your website. This is her website, which is wakemanlaw.net. That's wakemanlaw.net. You can reach her online at by phone at 815-893-6800. She apparently has Facebook and LinkedIn as well. Of course, she has contact us and everything else on the website. Wakeman Law is based in Crystal Lake, Illinois. Focuses primarily on family law, including divorce, child custody, child support, paternity, DCFS investigations, post-degree disputes, mediations, collaboration, divorces, and litigation. They also do handle some personal injury, civil matters, including auto accidents and medical malpractice. We may talk about that a little bit today as well. And the firm's family law approach emphasizes practical outcomes, careful preparation, and reducing the long-term damages that can arise in high-conflict divorces. Liz's broader litigation background gives her a very useful bridge between emotionally intense family cases and injury-related cases, where clients also are dealing with fear, loss, and disruption. So again, you can visit them online at wakemanlaw.net, and we will have a link to her website down below. Before we get started, as always, we are going to read from our sponsors as well. Our first sponsor today is SearchSift. Do you know why in Google Ads, some costs, particularly in law, can cost $100, $200, $300, even $500 or more, particularly in areas like personal injury? I don't know if Liz has ever had a chance to dabble in paid ads, but it can cost $500 or more per click. It's not because Google has a magical expensive lawyer button. It's because Google Ads is an auction. And when 5 or 10 or 20 law firms or other businesses in other areas like roofing, plumbing, and HVAC are all bidding on the same high intent search, a phrase like car accident lawyer, divorce attorney, criminal defense lawyer, etc., the price goes up and up and up. But here's what most firms and other businesses missed out on. Before someone ever clicks on an ad, before they ever see the map pack, before they ever choose a firm or a business to work with, Google's already shaping the search with autocomplete suggestions, and that's where SearchSift comes in. SearchSift helps position your firm or your business in the search journey inside the predictive searches before people make their decision. So instead of only fighting after the search happens, you start influencing intent before the click. And the neat thing about SearchSift is you don't pay to show up. You only pay when somebody actually clicks. So if you're tired of paying auction prices for every single lead, maybe it's time to stop fighting where everyone else is fighting. Visit SearchSift, that's searchsyft.com, and see what your market looks like. Again, that's searchsyft.com. And as always, we will have links to our sponsors down below. Our second sponsor is Groove Pages. And I lost my read there. There we go. If you're running an online business, that doesn't mean you should be paying for 12 different tools before you've even made a sale. And that's where Groove comes in. Groove ensures entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers have one platform for funnels, checkouts, emails, memberships, e-commerce, blogs, webinars, affiliates, automations, and more. There's no credit card. There's no trial that flips. There's no monthly software bill just to get started. Groove is free to use, and they only earn a small platform fee when you actually sell something on your website. So stop duct taping your business together with expensive subscriptions. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to start for free today and never pay anything. That is theattorneypost.com/groove. And again, thank you to our sponsors. We will have links to them down below in the description of this podcast. All right, jumping back over here. So again, I am joined today by Liz Felt Wakeman. She is the founder of Wakeman Law Group PC in Crystal Lake, Illinois. She focuses again heavily on Illinois family law, including divorce, custody disputes, child support, paternity, DCF issues, etc., like we talked about, while bringing experience again in personal injury, medical malpractice, auto claims, etc., for broader litigation. She began her legal career in insurance defense litigation, handling matters involving product liability claims, contract disputes, declaratory judgments, automobile accidents, premise liability, and medical malpractice before building a practice centered around helping families through some of the most difficult transitions of their lives. She's helped and handled complex family law matters involving high-value estates, custody contests, paternity claims, again, DCFS investigations, and post-decree disputes, and her work has included appellate-level family law cases. Liz is also a certified mediator and collaborative divorce attorney, which does give her a valuable perspective on when families can resolve conflict outside of the courtroom and when the courtroom preparation is exactly what makes settlement possible. That was a mouthful, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. So, Liz, my very first question to you is just this. What did I miss? What should people know about you personally that wasn't mentioned?
In addition to being a litigator, I'm also a mediator and collaborative divorce attorney. And I think so many family law disputes should be settled outside the courtroom before anything is even filed with the court. And lawyers don't encourage that because lawyers want to make money by going to court. And I think people are served much better if they get with an attorney who can sit down and work out a resolution and not waste money on going to court. You can go to court at the end to get it all finalized, but resolve it without it.
It's a little more peaceful and a little less painful.
Exactly.
I've had a number of family law attorneys on here, and the vast majority of them are not, but a handful of them are collaborative specialists. And when they are, that's one of the things that they pride themselves on the most. So it's a fascinating area of law that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. So I'm happy to kind of dive into that in a little bit. Before we do that, why don't you give me a pitch for your firm? If I didn't know anything about you, if I hadn't done the research I already done, if I hadn't looked at your website, and you and I had 30 seconds or a minute in an elevator, we're riding up together. I said, Liz, tell me what you do. Tell me what you do. Who do you help? Where are they located? And why do they choose to work with you and your firm?
I'm part of a team of 4 of us who work to help people in the northwest suburbs of Chicagoland get through their family law dispute as quickly and efficiently and as inexpensively, peacefully, and correctly as possible.
What was that last one?
Correctly, equitably.
Correct. I really thought you said corruptly. And I'm like,
No,
oh,
not corruptly. No, correct. Not corrupt.
that's not what I want my attorney to tell me. I figured I just misheard, but I figured I would ask in case my listeners also were like, wait, what did she just say? So just making sure. Totally fine. Well, that's awesome. So you have been practicing law for a while. Tell me about what got you into law. How long have you been practicing? Were you a little girl that grew up on, I don't know, Perry Mason and just you knew you wanted to do law? Was this something you stumbled into later in life? And then what got you into specifically family law and also PI, especially given that you started working, I think, on the other side, if I'm not mistaken?
My father was a judge, so every night was Perry Basin. Every night was a discussion of whatever his case was going on, and we would all share our thoughts and our analysis of the circumstances. I am in a family filled with lawyers, and so while I didn't think I wanted to do that right away because I was kind of shy at first, so I didn't think I would ever do litigation. And then some good friends encouraged me to do it. And so I went into the insurance defense business where I was working for the people who were being sued in injury cases. And that developed my litigation skills, my civil procedure knowledge, my participation in mediation and trying to negotiate. And I really love negotiating disputes because you get to the better results that way.
Mhm.
So that's how I got started. And I never thought I wanted to do family law, but I kind of became burned out on the insurance defense because I didn't feel like my client was my team member any longer. And I said to a friend, I want to have my client on the same team that I'm on. So I'm working for a common shared goal. And a friend said, try family law. And I've been doing it now for a long time and I love it. I feel like I get people to the other side. I feel like I've made some lifelong friendships from doing this, and I've helped more people than I can count get to a better life after it's over.
Very cool. I would imagine it's Sorry, I had like three different thoughts. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to chase because I do that sometimes. I think via tangents. So you worked on the defense side for a while before switching over to plaintiff side for things. I would imagine that being on the defense side in some ways is easier because you're there to just kind of punch a card and get certain results. As long as your results are averaging in a trend, you're fine. Whereas when you're working for your client, I mean, it's all on you. If you're on the plaintiff side or if you're on the family law side, you have a client, you're there to represent your client and ideally get your client's best interests in mind. I mean, you're still supposed to do that on the defense side too, but I feel like it's a lot more impersonal. What's the difference? What's the tension point there for you when it comes to working with individual clients versus an insurance company?
On the defense side, I feel like I would be trying to manipulate the law to make it work the best to get my client the right result and to utilize negotiation to like outbid, outsmart, outstrategize the other side. I do think defense is easier because you are just like fighting the punch, putting your fists up for the punches and
Mhm.
not needing to be as creative. But I was lucky to be in some really cutting edge defense law firms. So we did get to be creative. We were able to develop some new strategies that made a difference um, in how cases were resolved. And then, but I like being on the other side now where I'm helping the humans and not the business entities. I really do love helping truly people who are injured, helping them
Mhm.
get their result. And I will know how to do it because I'll know exactly what punches the defense will be putting up.
Yeah. Like I've
I,
mounted that attack before. I know what they're going to say, and here's how we do it. It's very interesting because most people I've talked to who have transitioned into PI started, at least a good number of them started on the other side first. And every single time, I'm like that has to be such an asset, knowing how the other side is going to think and present a case and having presented successfully in the past. And they all feel kind of the same way. Like I felt like I was doing a job and I was doing it well, but I wasn't helping the little guy. And there's something very important about helping the little guy, I think, which is good.
right.
So let me ask you about the family law side for a little bit here. And this is kind of out of left field, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Obviously, it's 2016, or sorry, 2026. We have not traveled through time. It's 2026, and about 6 years ago, the whole world shut down weirdly. And I've talked to attorneys from big cities and little cities, from the West Coast to the East Coast, and all stops in between. And I found that each one of them has kind of a different take on what the shutdown was like, that from how they experienced it, being in Illinois, being in Chicago or Chicago area, being in family law, being in PI. What was your experience of the pandemic and of the shutdown? How did it affect you and your firm? How did it affect your clients? And what were the good sides and the bad sides that you took away from it?
The bad side was waiting and not being able to get to court to get some immediate things taken care of. But that reinforced the lesson that I have found in my career is that the things that are urgent and immediate and an emergency today often resolve themselves by tomorrow if you just take a breath and take some small steps. I think that that was a good reminder to people that, okay, we can't get to court, so how do we figure this out amongst ourselves without running in front of a judge?
Hmm,
Because the emergencies can be resolved, and what's an emergency today will be a long lost memory a week from now.
gotcha.
Um, I think it helped litigants quite a bit because they don't have to always go to court now, and it
Mhm.
helped keep with good attorneys. It would keep your legal bills down because the lawyers could appear by Zoom and not waste an entire day in court, but can spend an hour in court, handle several things, and bill each client less if they're doing it ethically and appropriately. So I love that I can be more efficient for my clients by working on Zoom, and I can also, I think you can present some evidence much better by video than in person. The cross-examination of showing a particular page and line number and asking the witness, what did you spend that money on, versus, and then having them flip through pages versus being able to show a screen highlighted in yellow and say, what was that?
Yeah.
What did who did you go with when you spent $5,000 in Hawaii? When it's all highlighted, it's much more dramatic and poignant and impactful than flipping through pages and somebody can't find it and things
Yeah.
like that. I found that COVID gave me a chance to give some more thought to strategically handling my cases because we did have somewhat of a pause for a while where we could take time to think. And that's reinforced for me that I take that time to think even today, now that COVID is a thing of the past, to take time out to think about how to approach a case and not just be responding to the latest petition.
Gotcha. I talked to a number of family law attorneys, and they have wildly different experiences of COVID and divorce rates. I'm curious what your experience was. Some of them are like, we were never busier than when people were locked down and stuck together. But others said they actually saw, and they even saw data trends that at least in their area, divorce was down. So what was your experience on that end of the stick?
I found that filings were down in 2020 and then they markedly went up afterwards. And I feel like I still am getting new clients who say, I knew it was over in COVID, like being trapped with somebody. And I'm still getting the fallout from it. But certainly from 2021 until 2024, numbers just kept going up in my business. And many people attributed it to that shutdown time period and the financial implications of the shutdown, not having income, and so many different things about and kids struggling in school. That was COVID's impact on the education of our kids was enormous, and that
Yeah.
impacts how families interact and the family dynamic. Because if a kid is not getting all the services that they need, and they're acting out at home, and the parents have no release valve, I'm finding still that parents with neurodivergent children have much bigger issues and battles now than they had in 2019.
As in the neurodivergence itself has been exacerbated, or
Their tools for managing it were lost for a while, and people were trying to come up with a quick fix replacement when so much of what was done with the in-person IEPs can't be replicated. And when a neurodivergent human is locked in a house with other humans,
yeah,
it impacts the whole family.
yeah. No, it makes sense. So you've been practicing law for a while. You've been on both sides of the field. I'm a firm believer that, you step up to bat enough times, nobody bats 1,000, as they say. So, Liz, can you tell my listeners about a time in your legal career where you failed? Maybe it was a client that just said the wrong thing at the wrong time. Maybe it was the form got lost and wasn't filled out correctly, or whatever it happens to be. But what's one of the times in your legal career where you experienced failure? But what did you learn from that? And how do you always carry that forward to make sure you're giving the best care to your clients?
Well, when I've had a couple of situations where clients have misstepped and misstated things, or they've said one thing to me and I thought that they were going to say the same thing in court, and we talked about when they would say those things in court, and I even said this is the context in which you'll be asked about this in court, and then in court the client says something completely different. And very often you just can't quite recover from that, because once it's been said under oath, it's under oath, and it's difficult to backpedal. And I prepare my clients very well for what they can expect in court without having it sound like a scripted, rehearsed presentation and orchestrated show. But when clients don't say what I expect that they're going to say or what they tell me, recently I went back and I showed the client texts of all the times they told me X, Y, and Z, but in court on trial, they did not say those things. And another similar situation was where my client would say one thing in court and then had financial records that showed to the contrary. Because despite my saying, you have to produce every bank account that your name is on, even if it's not your money. You're on with your mother, you're on with an aunt, you're on with your grandmother, you must produce that. And then when they don't produce it and they're busted, and very often I didn't even know there was that account because they never provided to me either. That's frustrating and that's a fail. But there's
No,
only
that makes
so much
sense.
lecturing in advance and preparation I can do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You'd mentioned, you show them the receipts, so to speak. You show them the text messages they gave you, and then they say the opposite in court. In those situations, and I'm sure it's going to vary from case to case, and obviously you speak generally here, not about any specific client, but is that generally more them feeling ashamed to not wanting to tell you the truth, but then when they're under oath, they feel the pressure and they speak correctly, or is that just them panicking and saying the wrong thing, or what's going on there?
My feeling is that they're telling me the truth, but and then they're just afraid to say that truth publicly.
Ah, so it's
So
almost out.
they don't want the fallout of saying, like, I was afraid of her.
Yeah,
They'll say that to me privately that they're afraid of her because she did this, and this, but they don't want the public story, the public narrative to be that they were afraid of her.
gotcha,
And it goes both ways on the genders, but that they just don't want the public narrative to be the truth because it's too
gotcha.
hard to manage.
Okay, that makes sense. So here's the flip side, though. Obviously, it's not all roses, but it's not all failure either. I'm sure you've had some wonderful successes. You've got a thriving firm, you've got multiple people working there, et cetera. What's one or two of the things in your legal career, Liz, that you're most proud of? The proverbial feathers in the cap, if you will.
So there have been many, and I've been really fortunate to share some great outcomes with my clients. But one in particular was during COVID, actually. That client had a neurodivergent son with autism who was an adult, and she was looking for dad to contribute something. It was asking for very small sums, actually, something towards his support because he's very expensive and he's functioning enough to be able to hold a, a small part-time job, but he's never going to be able to support himself. And dad just refused steadfastly. And that dad ended up paying several $1,000s a month and will be paying that for as long as he lives. Had to pay tens of thousands of dollars of my attorney's fees. And so my client and I considered it an enormous victory. And she has so much financial security and freedom now and knows that she can take care of her child the best possible way she can. And that there are resources available that she can call on now for help that she couldn't do before. But it also reaffirmed this could have been resolved. And $100,000 was spent just on my fees alone
Wow.
for something that should have been resolved in a conversation
Yeah.
and could have been resolved in a conversation. Unfortunately, he had to pay the majority of that chunk of fees because of his bad conduct and ridiculous positions. But I really felt just thrilled to get that result for her. And
I
in
can
a
imagine.
non-family law area, an interesting case I had was a woman was a business owner. She bred cattle and raised cattle, and it was operated under a business she was the sole proprietor, only owner of this business. But the law was murky as to whether she could recover the business losses when it was technically a separate entity. And I was able to demonstrate up on appeal. And so I made new law in this area that if you are a sole proprietor and your business is effectively you, but in it's a different entity, you can recover those losses. So I was thrilled to get that result and make that law.
Wow, that's really cool. You don't hear about that every day. Setting precedent. You're
Right.
making the law that's being enforced, which is very cool. What is one of my favorite questions to ask attorneys when we're talking is just I find that attorneys deal with a lot of absurdity. And you've already sort of like hinted at a few areas where maybe this has come in, but what's one of the most just you shake your head and can't believe this happened sort of moment that's occurred to you in your legal career? And it could be on either side of, the plaintiff side, defense side, family, divorce, mediation, anywhere in between. But what's one or two of the things that when you think about just the absurdities of the human condition and the absurdities that sometimes come about with law, that you've encountered?
the absurdities of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation when you could have had a conversation and even if you had to go to court, have a pretrial conference where the judge would have said, you're going to have to support your child. The absurdity of that
Mhm.
um, is the most disturbing. And I can't think of a particular case right now that struck me as like more absurd than that because it's such a waste of resources. And if that father had put those resources to taking care of his son, the son would be, everyone would be better off. Um, I think the absurdity of fighting over things that, again, if we just let some conversation and let some um, like the environmental factors work things out.
Mhm.
I had I'm part of this group called Divorce Girl Smiling. And Divorce Girl Smiling is a network of people that have been vetted to help other people in the divorce process. And the day that I learned that there was a person who was an expert on helping to determine where a dog should be placed in the course of a divorce. And I am a big dog fan, but I did think it was a little absurd that this was a profession until my husband and I were separated and our dog was going back and forth and we were working it out peacefully and fine because we're good friends and it was all fine. But one day my dog did not want to go with him for some reason. And my my husband said, well, so she stays with you. I'll check on her tomorrow. And we let it all work out and it worked out fine. And the dog would decide when she was going to go, when she wasn't. But the absurdity that people can't work together like that to let, okay, if the dog gets to decide or the humans decide who's going to be available to take care of the dog, you should not need to litigate about the dog
Yeah.
or the
I've
cat
heard
or the guinea pig.
I've heard of divorce issues getting hung up on the silliest things sometimes. I talked to an attorney once and they said, and I don't remember what it was now. I'd have to go back and look it up. But I think it was like a box set of the Lord of the Rings, which you can buy right now on Amazon for $50, $100, whatever it is. It's not super expensive. It's a nice set, but it's not like the be all end all. And they spent thousands of dollars litigating over just silly things that are easily replaceable. I mean, sometimes there are things that are sentimental. I get that. Your aunt's
Mhm.
teaspoons or, a painting or something. But how do you help clients recalibrate what's important in the moment?
Well, that's so much about because I'm also a divorce coach, which we did not discuss before, but so I will try and help people identify and prioritize what's most important and what they're willing to give up in order to get this or that. Those skills have been so useful in my divorce practice to try and avoid that sort of situation. But I have that in a recent case where one party to the divorce would not let the client take any of her belongings from the house. So she then relocated and replaced all these things that could have the pasta maker, the pasta hanger, for example, he'd never made pasta. She always made pasta. When she repurchased a new pasta hanger, he claimed dissipation because she didn't need it. Well, no, you could have just given it to her.
Yeah.
That's the solution. Reason should have prevailed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You mentioned something a second ago. You said you're a divorce coach. I've never heard that term. At least I can guess at what you do. But for our listeners, what is a divorce coach and what do you do in that? And how does that intersect with what you do as an attorney?
A divorce coach is somebody who helps somebody deal with the psychological and the practical and the day-to-day concerns that come up that you don't really want to spend money on an attorney to resolve. And collaborative divorce, for example, uses divorce coaches quite a bit to like supplement as like an ancillary resource to going through the divorce. So when a party is feeling just like I don't want to have to decide this, the divorce coach can help them get to their decisions. Where an attorney is more in the role of telling them this is what the law will do, this is what a judge will do, this is what I recommend. So when I did the divorce coach training, I did do a like 6 months study to get this certification. Um, it was hard for the lawyers in the group to do that because it's so abnormal for us to not say this is what the law would do. But to be trained to learn how to have people get to the decision on their own. And then at the end, I can affirm that that's what the law would do. But to start, like to do it in reverse order of what attorneys would typically do. So it's helped my practice because there are some people who aren't quite sure if they want to get a divorce yet when they call me.
Mhm.
So I will say, let's have me put my divorce coach role on for a while before we go right to divorce lawyer role and see, go through the pros and cons and make the list and look at what you really are looking for the next 20 years of your life. It's a
Gotcha.
great set of skill sets, and I'm glad I was able to add those to my repertoire.
So for certain clients, do they take you on as an attorney and a divorce coach, or do you keep those more or less separate, or
They can do
do you?
both. I've had people have me as a divorce coach for some sessions, and then they say, no, I really just want to get a divorce. And
Okay,
the divorce coaching conversations helped get to that.
gotcha. So they'll transition from one direction to the other more or
Right.
less. Okay, that makes sense. Um, I'm sure people walk into your office with misconceptions about what you can and can't do, what they can and can't expect, etc. What is one or two of the most common misconceptions somebody brings into your office that if you could disabuse people of these notions, you would?
That just because something's filed with the court, the judge is not going to just decide. I can tell you, I've had 3 conversations today where my client said, couldn't the judge have just said XYZ? And it's not that simple. In order to get to the judge saying something or recommending, there's a process, and it's an expensive and protracted process to go through. So don't just expect the judge is going to have us appear the first day and decide that this is what's going to happen, because it's not going to be that way. And people don't understand it because it's contrary to all reason. But then at the same time, first of all, it's how the law works, so we can't change that. We're not going to change that. And also, it makes sense because a judge can't, you don't want a judge deciding somebody's next 20 years from a 6-minute court appearance. They're they're not going to have the whole picture. The other thing is that people thinking that a judge will have the ability to make the right decision. Judges don't, they actually usually don't make the right decision because they don't have all the information. They're constrained by the rules of evidence and rules of civil procedure. So a judge isn't going to hear everything that's important to know in deciding a case. So you really don't want a judge to decide your case because they're going to decide it on like this much of the picture, and they're going to be puzzle pieces missing that
Yeah.
they're guessing about.
It's like deciding if you like a movie based on the trailer, not versus the actual movie itself,
Exactly.
in a roundabout way. So Liz, you handle mediation, you handle collaborative divorce, you handle litigation. How do you know when a case is truly mediation friendly versus when it needs more of a firm courtroom posture?
So it's when one party's being unreasonable. Because if you have like the best way to settle a case is 2 people approaching it as a business transaction and 2 attorneys who are reasonable and just want you to get that transaction done.
Mhm.
Um, if somebody is looking to have punishment or compensation for past wrongdoings, or you have an attorney who is driven to make money on this case because somebody has money and we can get money on this one, then you're destined for the going to the courtroom.
Gotcha.
But if you have reasonable people, you should never need the courtroom because you'll get a better decision outside of the courtroom.
Hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Um, you've handled custody contests, parent disputes, parent time disputes, etc. What are some of the mistakes that good parents make when they're scared they're going to lose time with their kids?
Focusing on the idea of 50-50 is one of the worst things I think that can go through somebody's mind in making decisions about children. Children are not loaves of bread where you divide them into slices and pieces. And then the legal standard is what's in the best interest of the children. And nowhere in that best interest analysis does it look to what the parents' rights are, really. So but there's a huge movement to try and focus on 50-50. And in fact, that's not the trend in the courts that I practice in. The courts stick pretty firmly to the idea of what's in the children's best interests. And many judges will say having kids go from one house to the next day after day, not in the best interest. Having kids away from the other parent for a week, not in their best interest. There is some blended formula that will be some back and forth.
Mhm.
And then it's up to the parents to make it so it's less abrupt back and forth. Like make sure that the kids truly have two places to live, all their stuff in both places. So you buy two game stations.
Yeah.
You just suck it up, buy two, and not have to have the kids lugging stuff back and forth, but
Yeah.
have the kids go freely from one of their homes to the other of their homes.
That makes sense. I
It's
mean, it's
remarkable to me. People do that with their summer and winter homes all the time.
yeah, just do it with your kids. Make it as homey and stable. I mean, kids need stability. Everyone needs stability, but kids especially young kids, they really need that stability. I've always wondered. I have my degrees in philosophy and history, so I looked at law for a long time. I went to marketing instead because it was either become a lawyer or start a marketing agency. I did the latter of the two. But when I looked at law, I always thought that family law would be the hardest one for me to go into, as weird as that sounds, just because I would imagine sometimes it has to be draining on you, especially dealing with when there's real family friction, and particularly dealing with children. How do you handle that? How do you manage that, and how do you bring tempers down and make sure that the kids are the focus, and that they're being cared for in these situations?
Well, that varies greatly. And I actually always said I would never practice family law until that friend of mine said, you do have that team feeling when you're doing family law. And I love getting people to the other side of it. So personally, that's what I focus on, is that there's going to be a time when this is done where my client is going to be safe, secure, and not having to deal with X, Y, and Z, whatever the X, Y, and Z's are that are causing them to want to be divorced. Trying to get people to appreciate how you would want to be treated if you were a child in this situation. They don't want to hear bad things about their other parent. So don't say things bad about the other parent.
Yeah.
Nothing good comes from insulting mom or dad ever. The kids will figure it all out in their own good time, at least to the extent that they need to figure it out. So I focus on the idea of you are creating adults for tomorrow. How do you want your children to treat people and be treated as an adult? And so sometimes that will be, do you really want your child to think that this abuse is okay? Do you want your child to believe that it's okay to speak to someone like that? Because then they'll be spoken to that way, or they may speak to someone that way. And remind them that seems to be like a common refrain for me is, what are you demonstrating to your kids is the best way to be a parent?
Hmm.
I had a recent situation where I was a mediator, and I said, frankly, both of you are doing a very bad job right now of being parents. I don't think I'd ever said that to people before, but they actually both agreed that they were kind of being both being bad parents. So when we started to work through how could you be a better parent, and I think they've got a resolution. So just look at your parenting skills in the mirror and see, is that how you'd want your parents to behave?
That's going to be tough to to be able to say that to people in the moment, like, and I think I'd almost be afraid of the repercussions, like, oh, they're gonna not want to work with me anymore or whatnot. But I think it was a very important thing to say. That's really I thought you were gonna go the opposite direction. Like, you're both wonderful parents, and you just need to focus on the no, you're both being terrible parents.
Well, but they were both being good people, but they were both good people who were scarred and hurt and angry.
Yeah.
And so, because of these circumstances, you're both not. I mean, I actually said you both suck right now. It called for that. And they agreed with me. But you don't want to have an attorney or a mediator or really any profession in the course of a divorce just tell you what you want to hear because they will be misleading you.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, you go to a doctor not to have him tell you, oh, you're fine. You go to a doctor to diagnose the issues, and it's the same thing. You're there to diagnose the legal and relationship issues, and I think that's important. You mentioned on your website DCFS investigations as part of your family law experience. Without going too deep into criminal law, what should parents understand about a DCFS issue and how it can intersect with, a family case?
Um, Number one, they should have an attorney. And I actually often refer to somebody who does when the attorney's needed in the process itself. I will refer to someone else very often who's coattails with the criminal law because I don't do any criminal law. Um, know that DCFS, at least in the state of Illinois, is not effective. They will not do a very thorough investigation because they're not staffed to be able to do a thorough investigation. So get whatever information you feel DCFS needs to have to them as quickly and succinctly as possible, or it will be lost in the whole process. And know that DCFS appeals are expensive and often result in no change. So focus your efforts on getting the investigation done as correctly and completely at the onset. I've had people who have been really seriously hurt by DCFS investigations that found abuse or neglect when I looked at the facts, even without my client's advocate hat on, I thought, I don't know that this is really abuse or neglect. But they operate in this totally different plane than the rest of us live, where the DCFS investigators are constantly afraid that someone's going to get hurt or die. So they will jump to conclusions very quickly because that's the plane they're living on. And they just don't have all the information. So get the most important information to them as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. It's good advice. It's an unfortunate situation to be in. And obviously we do want to err on the side of caution when it comes to protecting children for sure. But sometimes organizations border on not inhumane, but inhuman, like in a real sense. Like it becomes more bureaucracy, I think, at times. I've heard horror stories, but I also know that it's there as a stopgap for a reason. It's there to protect kids. And so the intention is good. But anyway.
Right.
I'm going to shift for just a minute because we're already getting close to the end of the hour, but I wanted to ask a little bit more. Again, I mentioned early on, and we talked a little bit that you do some personal injury stuff as well. Particularly your regular personal injury. Oftentimes people think of car accidents, whatnot. I think you do those, but you also mentioned medical malpractice in particular. And I've worked with a number of medical malpractice attorneys over the years, and I know that medical mal is one of those really weird things because some states literally protect the doctors to the point that if you get hurt, you're out of luck. And in fact, if I remember correctly, I think it was John Hopkins did a study and they said probably the third leading cause of death is medical malpractice in this country. So I'm curious what your experience is in PI in general, but also with medical mal in particular in the Chicago, Illinois area. Are there state laws that make it easier or harder? What is your experience there?
A couple of decades ago, Illinois shifted for a hot minute to be one of those states that was going to really be protecting the doctors, and then it flipped right back again pretty quickly. So Illinois right now is probably one of the more fair states with respect to, and I haven't done an analysis, but I think you can recover damages but you're going to spend a lot of money to recover damages in a medical malpractice case. So attorneys are going to be really only able to take the cases that have the most horrific injuries to make it worth their while and the client's efforts worthwhile.
Right.
But Illinois is fortunately still one that will protect the patient, but it's a complicated and long and expensive process.
Yeah.
And I was not aware of that statistic, but it makes sense from some of the like really crazy things I saw on the defense side that would happen, that you'd think, how could that happen? But medical care providers are human. And
Look it up to make sure I'm not crazy. It says 2016, Hopkins study suggests medical errors are the third leading cause of death in the United States per year due to medical error in the United States, close to between 150,000 and 250,000 fatalities annually due to medical malpractice. And that's a lot. I mean,
right.
We regulate seatbelts, to protect people from cars. And I think there's 50,000 seatbelt, car accident fatalities a year or something like that. So it is significantly higher than what we would imagine. And I've always had a lot of respect for injury attorneys, medical malpractice attorneys. I work with a lot of them, like I said, because I think that you guys oftentimes are in that capacity. You're a stopgap, right? You're there to protect the little guy who otherwise couldn't afford. Attorneys are expensive. The average hourly rate of an attorney in Chicago is over $500 an hour. I don't know what your hourly rate is. I'm not going to ask you on the podcast, but I know that they're expensive. But when it comes to PI, you guys always work on contingency, and so you make law accessible. But yeah, when I heard that stat, it just blew my mind. And then to find out that there's so many states where they basically say, yeah, that's unfortunate, but it sucks to be you. You can't sue for this, that, or the other thing. I'm sorry the doctor took off the wrong leg. I'm sorry that you lost the wrong kidney or whatever it happens to be. So I don't know. I was gonna have you just riff a little bit more on that. What's the weirdest, if I can ask this and without divulging too much client information, what's the weirdest medical malpractice case you've encountered, or one of those things you're like, how did that happen? What in the world led to this series of events?
Well, the one that just came to mind, which is not the weirdest, but the most like oddly understandable, and yet at the same time you can never understand how it could ever possibly happen, is that a patient went in having some like pneumonia sort of symptoms, and it was given antibiotics and improving, and then for some reason unbeknownst to anyone went into cardiac arrest.
Wow.
And they were in the cardiac unit actually, and they went into cardiac arrest. So the beeping is happening and the alarms are sounding, but like there were 5 different levels of care assigned to that person's room, and all 5 of those people were legitimately engaged in some other crisis or problem or something where they weren't able to go to the room. So this person's alarms were going in the hospital for a long time, and the person died. And I still shake my head as I think about that. And then the interesting thing was I ended up as a patient in the hospital, and I had the same lineup of 3 of the 5 providers and said, okay, everybody needs to respond to my code. This is very serious.
Yeah.
The likelihood of that happening, that I had the same 3 out of 5 people for my own care, was mind-boggling. But no one was deliberately or negligently not attending to this woman. Everyone, like, they were involved in a different code. They were off duty because it was their break and they weren't on the floor. Everyone had something very legitimate that was happening. And then everyone else thought somebody else is responding. It is such a tragic story that will haunt me forever, that how did that possibly happen? But nobody did anything stupid, irresponsible.
It wasn't negligence per se. It just was almost a confluence of, what's the opposite of serendipity? Just a bunch of things that all happened at the same time coincidentally, and just was
beyond everybody's control.
That's
And
rough.
so this is the reality. No hospital can staff so that there's always somebody, despite their efforts to staff exactly that way,
Yeah.
because somebody will have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Somebody will become sick. It's operating with the expectation of perfection when we can't expect that at all.
No, that makes sense. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about just community involvement. I know you've been involved in community work, bar association stuff, mediation, and mentoring, etc. How has being rooted in the community shaped the way that you practice law? I know you've judged mediation tournaments. You've worked with law students. What do they tend to misunderstand about conflict, and how does that all play kind of a holistic picture in your practice, if that makes sense?
That's a lot of questions. So that
That's a lot of
last part
questions all at
about
once.
the young
It's me
lawyers.
trying to pull on three different threads and tie them together because I want to be respectful of your time, but I want to ask the questions.
So when I would go to the where I was judging the law school tournaments for mediation, it was often for a weekend, so I'd have my son with me, and he was like 7 or 8 years old, and he would sit in the back playing with his Game Boy. And he would often say to me at the end, well, that one just acted like a lawyer. So the law students would often present like they were advocating, and then we would have to coach them to present like you're mediating. You're trying to reach a conciliation here. But they go in with their briefcases loaded and their case law ready to go. And I thought it was hysterical that my little kid, while playing with his Game Boy, could sense the different tones in people, whether it was the person being a lawyer, the person who was going to be successful and win the tournament, because they were really mediating and negotiating. Um, my community involvement has been so hugely important to me because I'm an active believer in being a community servant. I created a parks department with some friends of mine that serves so many people every day. It's I'm so proud of the parks department and all the things that have come from that. Um, but I've had so many friendships. Some of my best friends are the people that I've met when I've been volunteering or creating something in the community. And then as an attorney, for a young attorney, I would say get involved, because not only is the community work rewarding, and when you get to see a park built that you helped build or a
Yeah,
service provided that you helped create, but it brings business too because you know more people. And so it's um, it's very rewarding to be involved in the community. I was raised to be a community servant and to be giving back, and I'm grateful that I've had that chance.
that's awesome. Well, Liz, I want to be respectful of your time. We're already coming up on the hour mark here. So here in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you my three closing questions. Before I do that, though, I'm going to jump back over and show your site one more time. Again, I am talking to the lovely Liz Felt Wakeman, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears her name. And you can find her online at wakemanlaw.net. Or you can also, again, give her a call at 815-893-6800 if you're having a family law issue and you are in the northwestern Chicagoland area. Feel free to reach out to her or visit her online and book a consultation. Do you guys do, like, if somebody wants to book a time with you, is the initial consultation for you, as in, like, do I need an attorney, like, just to figure out what their rights even are, or what their process looks like moving forward? What does that process look like to work with you and your firm, Liz?
So I try and make that as effective for both sides as possible. I don't charge for a consultation. I encourage people to get a consultation early rather than later. People
Hmm.
believe they have to have all their ducks in a row, their papers sorted, their documents put together when they talk to an attorney. They don't need to, and it would be best to talk before you're at the point where you need to produce documents versus after. I find that it's sort of like hospice. People go and do it a little too late and put it off too long, and you'll get much better um, results and much better um, like certain footing if you talk to somebody earlier rather than later. And when I do my consults, I do them primarily by phone or by Zoom. And then I also get a chance to decide if we're a good fit. And if I think we're not a good fit, I will be honest and we'll let you know and we'll send you, some suggest other places. But I think that free consultation is important to make sure that we both feel confident in the relationship and are ready to go forward.
Awesome. Well, if that applies to you, again, you can visit her online at wakemanlaw.net. And as always, we'll have links to her law firm's website down below in the description of the podcast. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News. When someone Googles your firm or your company, what do they actually see? Is it just your website, or do they see real credibility, trust, and authority? Because businesses getting chosen today aren't just visible, they're validated. And that's where Rank with News comes in. Rank with News helps feature you, your business, your firm, in major media outlets like Business Insider, Yahoo News, Yahoo Finance, AP News, and more, so that when prospects look you up, they don't just find you, they find that they trust you. This isn't about running more ads, it's about owning your reputation at the exact moment that it matters when somebody's actually searching. Visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time with a specialist to see what a news strategy could do for your business or your firm. That's rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news. All right, so Liz, you and I'm going to ask you my three closing questions here. Question number one is actually, I have a magical wand, and this magical wand can change something about your firm right now. If you could change one thing about your day-to-day practice, big, small, whatever it happens to be, what would you change about your firm?
Um, I would be able to help more people faster because it seems, I mean, if somebody catches me at a time when I'm in a lull, we can get things done really fast. But if somebody catches me when I'm on trial or taking care of a family emergency, then it can take a little longer. I wish we could help everyone immediately, all the time. We
There you go.
try, but
So
we can't.
you're just going to magically duplicate yourself like five more Liz's
Mhm.
who don't need to eat or sleep or, you know. That's good. Okay, question number two. We go back in time without breaking the space-time continuum, and you meet young Liz, maybe fresh out of law school. What advice would you give yourself as you're getting started?
Open my own firm earlier so I could do things as I want to do it, and so I could take care of people on my own terms because that I should have done that a long time ago.
Gotcha. Well, that's good advice. Very, very straightforward and very simple. Okay, question number three. I have a magical pin here. It's actually a miraculous pin. I'm going to give a free shout out to St. Benedict's Abbey in Atchison, Kansas, kansasmonks.org. It's a monastery of monks, and one of the fathers at that monastery must have blessed this pen because I found that it has miraculous ink. And with this ink, you can actually strike a law from the book, you can edit a law that's on the books, or you can add a new law. Unfortunately, it's almost out of ink. So if I were to loan you this pen and let you borrow it to make one change to the law, Liz, what change would you make? And this can be, again, national or local. It can be, with major ramifications, or it can be, getting rid of that stupid law that makes you fill out forms in triplicates, or just getting rid of parking tickets. If you could make one change to any law, what would you change and why?
Well, I think since I'm on the Illinois State Bar Association Family Law Section Council and I work with creating with advising about laws, uh, our current child support law in Illinois needs a lot of reworking. And I think there's a proposed bill that's going to be before the governor shortly that will change it a lot. And then I'm guessing that once that's changed a lot, I'm going to feel like it needs to be changed a lot again because the child support laws are never going to be exactly where they should be. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the new proposal for 2027 works out. And I'm guessing I will come back and say we still need a rework because child support's complicated.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That may take a little more ink than what's in this pen, but you could have a good start at the very least, right?
Yes.
So there we go. Well, Liz, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and my listeners today. I always like to let my guest have the final word. Are there any last words of wisdom or thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Just talk to an attorney sooner rather than later. If you have a question, call the attorney because we would rather be able to help you sooner and not fix something that's broken later. And um, work it out outside of court if at all possible.
Absolutely. That's good advice. And I mean, that's kind of the tagline of our show, right? If you don't know your rights, you don't have any. So make sure you know your rights. Well, as always, this has been the Attorney Post. I have been chatting with Liz Felt Wakeman, who is the name on the masthead over at Wakeman Law Group PC. Again, that is wakemanlaw.net, wakemanlaw.net. I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying your name. I've been talking a lot today, so it's just the end of the day, and the tongue is getting a little tied here. As always, this podcast, though we do talk about a lot of legal issues, does not itself constitute legal advice. If you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Obviously, if you're in the Chicagoland area, I think Liz has a wonderful law firm that would be a great resource for you if you've got a family law issue or an injury issue, etc. So please feel free to look her up. I can confidently say I think that you would be well served working with her and her firm. As far as the podcast goes, if you are listening to us on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, please rate us, leave us a comment, let us know where you found us. If you're on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. But the number one thing you can do to help us grow this podcast is simply this. If you know somebody who would benefit from the information we talked about in this podcast today, maybe someone in the Chicagoland area who's having a family issue and they need help, they need a divorce coach or whatever it happens to be, share this episode with them so that they can get the knowledge that they need and they can get started on the process of knowing what their rights are. Because as I always say, as the tagline of this show is, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, this is Justin West, your host. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you soon.